Question on here about whether or not you saw war coming with things like the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria, the taking of the Sudetenland. Did you have a sense that something like war was imminent?
No, not at all, for the very simple reason that propaganda included the fact we want peace. Yeah. And Hitler's entire approach to any kind of problem which existed at that particular time was, I think I'm going to get away with this. And he got away with everything and anything until Poland. And we hoped that the Polish crisis would also be resolved in some sort of peaceful manner, or at least after Poland surrendered after 2 weeks of war, we thought that should be the end of the entire confrontation and we'd go back to normal life. No, we did not expect war, not at all.
Okay. Why don't you go?
When Germany first went to war, did you believe that you would win, that the Germans would eventually come out victorious?
Well, that leads me into another little bit of a talk here. Even in 1944, when everybody in Germany knew that we're not going to win this war, yeah, everybody kept on fighting, of course. And as you may be aware, the armed forces fought with anything they had and were, admired for the fighting spirit. I myself, in 1944, was far more concerned about my next date with my girlfriend than I was about the German armies losing another 100 kilometers in Russia. One thing which I'm trying to convey time and time again is that people really are not nearly as occupied with the country being at war as they are expected to be or are supposed to be. I never had the feeling during the entire war that I was fighting a war. My entire 5 years were like, I'm alive and I'm living at a time when there is war. But everything, the interest one had, the activities one carried out, everything was geared to, hey, let's forget about the war. We want to live. And going to another submarine mission, to me, wasn't really anything else but, okay, it's another day at the office. Mind you, the day at the office lasted 3 to 4 months, but when we came home again, when we came out of the office, that's the last thing we wanted to talk about. In other words, we really had very little interest in the events of the war. Whether the German submarines were very successful and sank millions of tons, or whether we lost dozens of submarines in 1 month or something like that, nearly penetrated us as anything important. This was simply the entire world we lived in. Okay, we're going to live with it. And whether we're winning the war or losing the war, didn't really matter all that much. Somebody has to lose, one has to win. When we surrendered the Canadian Navy back in 1945, the one feeling we had was not we lost the war and I'm sad about it. Not at all. Didn't penetrate our mind at all. What was important? Hey, you're still alive against all odds as far as German submarines were concerned.
What's your training like in the Navy, and what inspired you to join that part of the armed forces?
Well, as I mentioned before, it was simply the interest I developed as a kid, because my father had been in the Navy, and I read every book about naval warfare, and my heroes were Hawke and Nelson and De Ruyter and so on. And in addition to that, I'm going to be facetious here, but I don't like walking, so I don't want to join the army. You know, I mean, in the Navy, I don't have to do that. And then there are things I was dreaming about becoming the naval attaché in Tokyo, or maybe I was dreaming of playing soccer against the British in Hong Kong. Or this kind of thinking in my mind as a kid, okay? But all that confirmed my intention that yes, I want to join the Navy. I wanted to be a naval officer.
What's your training like in the Navy, and what inspired you to join that part of the armed forces?
Well, as I mentioned before, it was simply the interest I developed as a kid, because my father had been in the Navy, and I read every book about naval warfare, and my heroes were Hawke and Nelson and De Ruyter and so on. And in addition to that, I'm going to be facetious here, but I don't like walking, so I don't want to join the army, you know. I mean, in the Navy I don't have to do that. And then there are things, I was dreaming about becoming the naval attaché in Tokyo, or maybe I was dreaming of playing soccer against the British in Hong Kong. Well, this is kind of thinking in my mind as a kid, okay? But all that confirmed my intention that yes, I want to join the Navy. I wanted to be a naval officer.
What's your training like in the Navy, and what inspired you to join that part of the armed forces?
Well, as I mentioned before, it was simply the interest I developed as a kid, because my father had been in the Navy, and I read every book about naval warfare, and my heroes were Hawke and Nelson and De Ruyter and so on. And in addition to that, I'm going to be facetious here, but I don't like walking, so I don't want to join the army, you know. I mean, in the Navy I don't have to do that. And then there are things, I was dreaming about becoming the naval attaché in Tokyo, or maybe I was dreaming of playing soccer against the British in Hong Kong. Well, this is kind of thinking in my mind as a kid, okay? But all that confirmed my intention that yes, I want to join the Navy. I wanted to be a naval officer. Periscope depth, and looked out, and the commanding officer saw a small warship coming straight towards us. And so what he did at that time, he fired one torpedo out of a stern tube, an acoustic torpedo, in other words, a torpedo that does not have to be aimed. That acoustic torpedo is searching for noise, and it found the noise of that warship and hit it and sank that warship in about 4 or 5 minutes. That was the last Canadian warship that was lost during the war. So that is the only ship which was sunk by U-190 while I was aboard.
Okay. Were you personally scared or nervous while serving on the U-boat? And do you remember battle fatigue affecting crew members?
Well, I said to you earlier on, most of the time is boredom, and then there are moments of terror. And being down there and waiting for these depth charges.
Question on here about whether
warships, they were of no use to us. We wanted to sink cargo ships. But towards the end of the war, when we, I might mention here that in the last year of the war, Germany sank 0.2% of the ocean traffic. In other words, practically nothing. We had no way anymore of getting close to cargo ships, or they knew how to get away from us. What I'm saying here is that at the end we were told, you've got to go out again and reach to Halifax to tie down ships, planes, soldiers, who otherwise, if they were not used for anti-submarine warfare, would be available for the war in Europe.
Okay. How many ships did your U-boat sink?
My boat, as far as I stepped on U-190 only after its third mission, and until that third mission, it had sunk only one ship. And when I stepped aboard, we never saw any cargo ships at all. When we were operating outside the harbor of Halifax, where we were sitting, waiting for cargo ships to come, but by that time, by the way, cargo ships were no longer formed in the convoys in Halifax, as had been the case most of the war. They had now been moved to Boston, so there was hardly any traffic whatsoever. We were sitting there, submerged outside the harbor of Halifax for 50 solid days without ever coming to the surface, and waiting for something to happen. And at one time or the other, we heard inside the boat the pinging of the astic. Astic is sort of an echo sounder equipment which the Corvette had, which they sent down